So as you can tell by this thing, I just finished watching Marty Supreme. I watched it last night actually, and I've been thinking about it for the past day. Not necessarily the movie, but the topics that it talked about. And I've always been someone who has been fascinated by obsession. I've been fascinated by personalities who seem very narcissistic. You know, guys from Kanye West to Michael Jordan to Marty Supreme, I guess. Um, a lot of these professional athletes, musicians, celebrities, they seem very egotistical on the outside. And they seem very narcissistic on the outside. And they seem very selfish on the outside. And I think they are to a degree internally also. But I think the difference between a narcissist and someone who has a huge ego but is successful is a narcissist is delusional. A narcissist is selfish and has an ego to protect himself, while an obsessed person, say like the social network with Mark Zuckerberg, this person's so obsessed with creating something that he pushes everyone away. Now, that can be selfish and it can be narcissistic, and there are traits of that. But I think there's a huge difference between that and someone who is regardless of other people, who does it for their own benefit rather than the benefit of the creation or the benefit of the game or the benefit of enjoying what they do or winning. You know, like for Michael Jordan, I think it's just an obsession with winning. I don't think it's about him wanting to be better than anyone because he always needs to be the best. I think he just loves winning and I think he hates losing. And I think he's going to do anything, including growing his ego and having his ego be larger than life itself and seeming like a narcissist. I think you're doing something wrong if people aren't pointing their finger at you and saying you're selfish, you're narcissistic, you're egotistical, you're just self-centered. I've gotten that a lot, and I've realized that every time I get that a lot, it probably means I'm doing something right. And that's going to sound cocky in itself, that's going to sound egotistical in itself, but at the end of the day, I mean it as I'm doing something right, as in when I look at my reality. And I think that that's the difference between someone who is selfish. I think the difference is that someone who has like a god complex, that's one I've been told a lot, is regardless of everyone else and puts himself or themselves as number one. So they use the ego to protect their identity. They use the ego to protect who they really are, the self, right? And Carl Jung talks about the self, the shadow, and the ego. And I think someone who has integrated their ego and knows the self has and knows the shadow, which if you don't understand what I'm saying, just read Carl Jung. Um, Someone like a Michael Jordan uses the ego as an instrument. He uses it to play. He uses it to win. He uses it to become successful. While someone like a regular guy who thinks that he's the best at basketball, meanwhile he's playing at a high school and losing every weekend, that guy's delusional. That guy has no he's not in touch with reality, and the ego is so different than the actual life that he's living and the actions that he's making. But I also think it's different when someone thinks that they're headed somewhere. When someone knows or thinks or believes that they're headed somewhere and that they have this ego about it, I think other people see a timeline and they see that's not going to happen. That's not possible. How, right? Like with Kanye West is a perfect example of this. Every single thing this guy has done, some in some sort of way, it's went towards exactly what he said. In some sort of way. Even if you disagree with him completely, even if you think he's genuinely mentally crazy, you can't deny how he just speaks things into existence and the world just catches up years later. And I think that that's a trait that comes with successful people, and not just successful people, but the most successful people, the top 0.001%. I think they need to fuel their ego and have such a massive ego that to other people they seem narcissistic, to other people they seem like they have a god complex, when in reality they're using it as fuel, they're using it as energy, and they've integrated their ego. They know exactly who they are, and they don't let the ego define them. They don't use the ego as a mask to hide who they really are, but they use the ego to get themselves in this almost delusional state where it's like, I'm not going to listen to anyone, because if I listen to anyone, that's my dreams dying. That's me thinking that my vision of myself, it might not happen. That's a doubt, because that's what people are going to do. People are going to doubt you. So the minute you start to listen to other people and you go, oh, maybe he's right, maybe I can't do it, you instantly start to fail. You instantly start to fail. And I think the top 1% doesn't even do that. They don't listen to people. They just go on their vision, and they're so focused, and they use ego to do that, but they're so focused that it doesn't even enter their consciousness. That's something that Marty Supreme said at one point. He goes, I don't let it enter my consciousness. I think that's the level of delusional you have to be to become successful, to become the best at whatever it is you want to become. And I think on the outside, that's going to look very selfish to people. And it is to a degree. But there's a big difference between that and someone who is not in touch with reality, who believes that they are better than everyone, or who plays as if they are better than anyone. You know, they develop this ego and this god complex to compensate for feeling worthless, for feeling like they're not good enough. And it's very complex, because you'll meet some of the top 1% athletes who feel like that. They're like, I don't know if I'm good enough. Like, if you really delve deep into them, it's always some sort of trauma. But you can't just point your finger and say that's all ego and that's all selfish and that's all bad. Pride is a killer, but ego needs to be integrated into your work. It needs to be integrated into your life, and you need to use it as fuel. Use the wrong way, you become a narcissist, you know, but use it the right way and you could become the best in the world. And I think that that's a hard line to cross, and it's an easy line. It's a hard line to recognize, and it's an easy line to cross. So I think about this a lot. You know, some of my favorite movies like Whiplash, Social Network, Marty Supreme was probably my favorite movie of last year. And I really do think that this topic of obsession, narcissistic traits on a character who is just chasing some sort of dream, you know, whether that's from a trauma or some sort of addiction or hating to lose, whatever it is, I think everyone needs to look at that and be like, what can I do? What am I going to use my ego for? And not just sit there and use the ego to protect themselves. I think you need to use it like a tool. You need to implement it into your life, and you need to be very careful, but you can't listen to what people say. You got to listen to what you and whatever connection you have to what it is that you're doing. You have to listen to that, and you have to be delusional. You have to not be afraid of seeming egotistical, just like me posting this and making this right now. So they can say you have a God complex. I think at the end of the day, when it comes to spirituality, that's when you have to actually believe in God and know that at the end of the day, you're in a room with you and just Him. So I'll leave it at that.